In this tutorial, we're going to look at a type of loop in JavaScript called the do-while loop. It might sound similar to the while loop, which we looked at in the previous tutorial, but it's actually quite different. In the previous tutorial, we looked at the while loop, and the way that works is a condition that we specify is tested, and if that condition evaluates to true, then a block of code inside the loop will run. Then the condition will be tested again, and if it's still true, then the block of code will repeat, and so on. So the code in the loop will keep repeating until eventually the condition evaluates to false. But with a while loop, the condition is always tested first before the code in the loop runs. If it's false in the first iteration of the loop, then the code inside that loop will never actually run. A do-while loop works the other way around, however. The code that is in the loop runs first, and then after running that block of code, it then tests a condition, and if that condition evaluates to true, then the block of code in the loop will repeat. And it will keep repeating until the condition evaluates to false. So let's have a look at a flowchart that shows, or two flowcharts that show how these loops work. On the left, we have a regular while loop, which is what we looked at in the previous tutorial. And that's an example of what's called pretest repetition. So this is how it works. There's a condition that's tested. We might be comparing if two numbers are the same, or if two strings are the same, or maybe if one number is greater than or less than another. But the condition is tested first. If that condition is true, then the code block inside the loop will run, and then the program will test the condition again, run the code if the condition is true, and it will just keep repeating until eventually the condition evaluates to false, and the loop will end and the rest of the program will continue running. With the do-while loop though, we can see it's actually working the opposite way around. So firstly, the code inside the loop, that runs first, and then it tests the condition, and if that condition evaluates to true, then the code inside the loop will run again. Otherwise, if it's false, then the loop will end. So what this means is that it repeats code, or repeats blocks of code, like we can do with a while loop, but it means that the code inside the loop will run at least once, even if the condition evaluates to false in the very beginning. So what that means is when the loop runs for the first time, even if the condition that's being tested evaluates to false, the code inside the loop will still run at least once, then the condition will be tested again, and if it's false, then the loop won't run again. Alright, so let's have a look at our previous while loop here. From the previous tutorial, this example here. We had a counter variable, which was set to 1, so it's just an integer variable storing the value 1. And we had a while loop that says, while the counter is less than or equal to 10, display the counter in the console, and then increase the counter by 1. And this keeps repeating. The counter will display in the console, and it will keep increasing by 1 until eventually the counter is no longer less than or equal to 10. Then the loop will end, and the console will display the goodbye message. So if we run the code, that's what it looks like. It displays all the numbers from 1 to 10, then the loop stops because the counter is no longer less than or equal to 10. It gets up to 11, and so the loop doesn't repeat again. Alright, but if we were to change the counter to something that made this condition false, for example, if we made the counter 20, so now at the beginning, before the loop has even run, the counter is not less than or equal to 10. What that means is if we run that code, the loop will never run. The loop is skipped, or the code block inside the loop is skipped because that condition does not evaluate to true. However, if we were to change this to a do-while loop, the code inside this block would run at least once, because with a do-while loop, it tests the condition after running the code in the loop. Alright, so I'll just change that counter back to 1, and I'm going to change this while loop to a do-while loop. And the way that we do this is we just say, we'll get rid of this, so I'm going to cut this bit here. Alright, and we've got our curly brackets here and the code block that we want to run when this loop repeats. And I'm going to add the word do to the beginning of that. So we say do and the code that we want to run, and then at the end of that do block we can put in the while and a semicolon at the end of that. So it's saying do all of this code here, or run all of this code here, while this condition is true. But this code will run first before the condition is tested. Now if we save this code and refresh the page to run that code, we just see all the numbers from 1 to 10 and the goodbye message. So it looks just the same as how it was before. But if I change this counter now to be 20, we see that it displays the number 20 and then the loop ends and it says goodbye. All right, and that's because the counter is set to 20. The do while loop runs this code first, so it displays 20 on the screen, and then it increases the counter by 1, so now it's 21. And then it tests the condition to see if the counter is less than or equal to 10. But the counter is equal to 21, so that condition evaluates to false, and this loop never repeats this block of code again. The loop breaks, and the rest of the program runs. So that's basically how a do while loop works. So they can be used to repeat blocks of code just like a while loop. But if you're ever creating a program and you want to create a loop that runs a block of code, but you always want that block of code to run at least once, even if the condition evaluates to false, then that's one way of doing it with a do while loop. That's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to look at how to create for loops in JavaScript. Thanks for watching.